Hello everyone again, and welcome to this new edition of the GeOnG forum. As I was writing these few words, I realized that it was my 6th edition. I have been a participant, a volunteer, a speaker, but I never thought I would ever be in charge of the opening address of the GeOnG forum as the president of CartONG. But here we are, and it's really nice to see some of you again, and to welcome also new faces as well. Looking back, I also would have never thought possible for us to choose this year's main theme, Do No Harm in the Era of Environmental Emergency, Revisiting Information Management in the Health Sector. In a few minutes, our technical director, Sandra Sudhoff, will kick off the standard debate between our two keynote speakers. She will delve into more detail about this theme, but I just wanted to say how I'm glad of the choice we made. To me, it's very encouraging to see information management specialists actively considering and debating the environmental impacts of data and digital technology and processes. Of course, there is no easy answer. Yet, I'm curious to see where the conversations will take us in the next 3 days and what avenues for the improvement we will find. For those of you who are new to the event, let me say a few words about it. The GeOnG Forum is one of the largest conferences in Europe on issues related to data management in the health sector, and more generally speaking, on the use of new technologies to support humanitarian and development action. During the next 3 days, we invite you to discuss the current and future stakes of data management in the sector, share good practices, and innovative solutions, remembering that information management is a means to an end and should never be a goal in itself. Since its creation 16 years ago, our organization, CartONG, a humanitarian to humanitarian NGO specialized in data management, has been supporting not only its partners on their data management journey, but all aid actors. As part of our action as a resource and expertise center, we help build knowledge and capacity on information management tools and methodology within the sector as a whole. This is why we have been organizing these events every 2 years since 2028. In the same way, please check out the Information Management Resource Portal, which was launched in June 2021, and that aims at compiling all the most relevant information management resources of the sector in one place. After 2 years of COVID-19, this year we are back in Chambéry. I hope that we will enjoy the friendliness, the opportunities to network in person, and all the informal chats that you have missed. But as a GeOnG team, that of course I would like to thank, didn't find a normal GeOnG challenging enough, we decided this year to keep some of the online features from 2020 to allow for a larger and more diverse participation from the sector. So a warm welcome also to all of you who are following us from remote. It's looking like a promising edition. We have more than 140 organizations and 50 countries represented here or online. We were very happy this year with the number of submissions received via our open call for suggestion. It's nice to see how people being inspired. I'm taking this opportunity to thank the members of the steering committee, Lisa Daoud, Becky Kazansky, Linda Raftree, and Kathy Richards for their support in developing the core architecture of the agenda. You will have the opportunity to see them in action during several sessions today, or the next few days. CartONG and the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, HOT, have also embarked upon a collaboration concerning the 2022 GeOnG, with this year's edition being part of the HOT Unsummit World Tour 2022. And we are very pleased to welcome more OpenStreetMap representatives than usual to Chambéry this year, and to continue the discussions later this week with them after the main GeOnG event is over. I would like to thank the partner of the event who made this edition possible, our main sponsor, the French Development Agency, as well as Activity Info, S3, KfW Development Bank, and Palladium, and all of the other sponsors of this 8th edition, including our media sponsor, Alternative Humanitaire. You will have the opportunity to meet them at their stand during the next 3 days, either in the room above or online. A couple of special thanks, first to the city of Chambéry, with one more supporting the GeOnG and welcoming us at their Congress Center, and secondly to our volunteers, without whom it wouldn't be possible to organize such an event. As my speech is coming to an end, here is some practical information I have been asked to pass on. The event is taking place on site in Chambéry for the next 3 days. Starting at 9 each day, you are welcome to join us as early as 8:30 for a coffee. Since some of the sessions are being streamed live this year, we will have to be a bit strict with time and start and end each session on time, at least for the first 2 days. We thank you in advance for supporting this effort. Tonight, we will welcome La Fresque du Numérique, or Digital College in English, to learn more about the environmental impacts of digital technologies. The workshop will be run both in English and French. We really hope to see many of you this evening. Also, don't miss out the Failfest at the end of day 2 and the closing session with Pierre Gallien on day 3. The online version of the GeONG will run until tomorrow evening. You can find all necessary information on the welcome page of the platforms. For remote participants, if you have any question, use the conference chat. Feel free also to post pictures and share moments from the event on social media. You can use the hashtag #GeONG2022. Last but not least, please be mindful of your use of Wi-Fi at the Congress Center. We want it to be used in priority for sessions to avoid this turning into field-like conditions. Please disconnect from the Wi-Fi when you don't need to use it. Many thanks in advance for that. And I'm going to stop there and wish you all a very great edition. Please let me introduce Aurélie Le Meure, first Deputy Mayor of Chambéry in charge of international relations. Welcome, Aurélie, and to all, have a very, very great conference.
Thank you, Edmond. Good morning to all of you. To introduce myself, I am Aurélie Le Meure, first Deputy Mayor of the city of Chambéry. I would like to begin by saying how proud the city of Chambéry is to regularly host this major event on the use of new technologies in the humanitarian and international development sectors. The GeONG is one of the largest independent conferences on the subject in Europe, and we are delighted that Chambéry can bring you together. Your event contributes to Chambéry's opening to the world. We are indeed a city that is naturally very influenced by international culture. In Chambéry, 12% of the population is a foreign nationality. Our university, the Savoie-Mont-Blanc University, welcomes more than 1,500 foreign students every year. And we have more than 100 associations with an international vocation like CartONG. This international character contributes to the richness of Chambéry, a cosmopolitan city where life is pleasant. In 2021, the city of Chambéry and Chambéry Solidarité Internationale gave birth to the book Les Oiseaux Migrateurs, Migrating Birds, which I highly recommend. It's a collection of culinary portraits of Chambéry citizens who have come from elsewhere. What better way to bring people together than through the kitchen? I'm glad, Edmond, to offer you one. In an increasingly interconnected world, we believe that the openness of our city is one of the keys to its evolution, to reinvent itself, to be in resonance with the issue of our time, and to live well together beyond cultural and generational differences. The city of Chambéry is proud to belong to the network of welcoming cities and territories for 1 year. We are therefore very attached to international cooperation. For this reason, we are very proud to be able to welcome you to Chambéry for these few days. We are convinced that your work is essential to meet planetary challenges. It's indeed an exceptional challenge to be able to put data at the service of a just cause, solidarity, development aid, sharing of resources, adaptation to climate change, reception of migrants. So I wish you good exchanges, a good work, and I hope that you will feel at home in our city of Chambéry for those who come from far away. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am super happy to be here and actually see many people here in the room, see faces that I know, and also have the chance to get the good of both worlds from the 2020 edition and have our also our audience online. So thank you very much for all being there. And I have the honor to actually take you through our opening debate today. Before I'm going to introduce our two speakers, I want to share a few thoughts with you. Basically, we've been in this digital revolution era these past 10 years or so, and in our sector, it actually seems as if tech solutionism has been rather rampant. So we come out with a new tool for every process or problem that we encounter, and we need to ask ourselves the question, is this actually the way to go? I mean, let's be clear about this. Most of the time it's really useful and what we do, but sometimes there can also be the question, is it always the right thing to do? Our side, it happens quite often still that when we ask our partners, well, can you tell us why you're digitizing this form? That we actually get a blank stare. They haven't thought it through. What are they trying to achieve with this digital form or with this type of data collection? Of course, the idea of the theme of the GeOnG is not really to wag a finger and say, well, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, or to stop all use of tech, because that's not very realistic. Especially when you look at the environmental impact. I mean, there is an element there that we need to think about, but we should probably be rationalizing a bit more the way the tech is used, and to keep it for when it's really useful, and to try and follow a few guiding principles to ensure that the tech that we use is really sustainable, or let's say as sustainable as possible. So before we dive into the debate, we actually wanted to ask you, our audience, two questions to take a bit the temperature of the room and online, and also to take you through the topic, or basically your take on the topic. You will now see a QR code on the slide. There you go, which allows you to access our online tool and answer the question that we are posting there. For those of you online, we should be posting the link also in the chat, so if you rather want to use your computer to access the questions, you may do so. For all of you others, flash your mobile phone. That's usually not something that you get to hear during a conference, but please do it now and connect to the code and see the question that comes up. So our first question is, how aware would you consider yourselves of the impact, be it positive or negative, of our data systems in terms of environment? So you'll be asked to rank when you access the question. And this is a live result, so you can already see everyone who's kind of submitting comes up here. And it's moving, as you can see, as it's kind of a live aspect. So we have a few more seconds to go. 2, 1. All right. So we have actually quite a variety of answers. A few say very much so. There are some that say to some extent, and a few that say a little. Now, of course, we hope through the course of the 3 days that you will be leaving this conference with some more ideas, some more notions on the topic that will help you as you go on. We have also a second question, and that's actually, can you think of ways we might do harm today as a data community in terms of environment? What we'd like to ask you is just to answer maybe in 3 to 4 words, not a full sentence, because then it's harder to actually read it later on the screen. So if you can condense your thoughts in a notion of 3 to 4 words, that will be great. So we have also the first results coming up, so we have some very fast people here in the audience and online. and it moves quite heavily. So you have 30 more seconds to put in your thoughts. So obviously energy consumption is already pretty big, so that's already distilling itself as something that more than one person has actually put. It's moving quite heavily, so it's hard to make a sense out of it while it's still ongoing. But energy consumption clearly is still on top. But yeah, okay, great. Well, there are very many interesting things here. Of course, the CO2, the carbon footprint, which has been answered just in different words, but a couple of times as well. So that comes in heavily. Also on the device production, supply chain, duplication, ethics. So thank you very much for sharing these thoughts with us. And I do believe that we will have some more food for thought coming through our keynote speakers in just a minute. So thanks again, lovely, for your participation. And now I'd like to introduce our two keynote speakers for this morning. We have Lars Peter Nissen, Director of ACAPS. He is experienced in both sudden onset disasters and also more protracted crises. He has been actually working in numerous crises across the world in these past 20 years. He has also, importantly, coined the term H to H, which means humanitarian to humanitarian. And he's quite well known as a forward thinker on how aid and humanitarian assistance should be delivered and could be improved, and runs his podcast show, True Humanitarian, where he has honest conversations with sector specialists about what the humanitarian sector is and what it should be. And we also have Benjamin Lang. He's a responsible digital technology expert, an independent consultant in digital strategy, operational improvement, and organizational and digital project management, with 10 plus years of expertise in especially supporting local authorities and public organizations in France. So you can see he's a green IT expert in France, really, and well known. He also teaches at the ESEP, School of Digital Engineering in Paris, and he's a regular contributor to the Institut du Numérique Responsible, with a think tank, basically. And last but not least, he's also very involved in the Fresque du Numérique, which is a collaborative awareness-raising activity, and we all kind of invite you to come tonight, as Edmond has pointed out, because we will hold such an activity tonight. So, thank you for joining us, both Lars and Benjamin, and maybe we can come up to the stairs more in the center. It's working. It's going to be a bit more dynamic if we're here in the center, so we decided to opt for being here with you. So let me start with you, Lars. So what is the promise of digital tech, and are we delivering on fulfilling that promise? What do you think?
Yeah, so you said you wouldn't be wagging any fingers today, but I think I might be wagging one or two just to give you a heads up. I think if we want to understand the promise of tech, we have to start by thinking around the purpose of what we do. And the only way that makes sense for me to think about why are we actually here, what are we actually doing, is to say that in one way or another, we are all engaged in enhancing the agency of crisis-affected population to more clever use of data and tech. So it's really about the agency of the people affected by crisis, the ones we used to call beneficiaries. Right? What does agency mean in this sense? I think it essentially means more choice, freedom to be and to do. And we're talking about highly marginalized people without a lot of choices. I see it as our job to make sure that they have better choices. You could say that, excuse me, you could say that we have in a sense, been operating with sort of a wholesale model of aid, where we treat everybody the same way. And I think one of the promises that tech gives us is that we can move towards more of a retail approach, where the individual situation of the individual family, of the individual person, is much more taken into account in terms of the services we provide. Now, that's difficult, and I think it's difficult for two reasons. One, we operate in a sector where we are strung out between upward accountability and downward accountability, as we sometimes call it, between serving the people who give us the money and the people who receive the services. And I think you can sort of see two scenarios happening there. On one side, we all know that tech lends itself very well to creating a better user experience for the recipient of services, but we also know that tech is very good at concentrating power. And my first wagging finger may be that when we happily go about developing apps or introducing new tech in our organizations, are we really thoroughly thinking through the implications of that tech? What are we actually doing? Are we empowering the people we serve? Are we giving them better choices? Or are we enabling a level of control which for people in vulnerable situations can be extremely dangerous? We've seen several examples of individual data being leaked, hacked, and obviously posing a threat for the individuals that data came from. Now, how aware are we of that? And if we talk about do no harm, I think we have to think about that. So I think one danger is the double-edged sword of tech, the great promise, the great possibility to serve people better, but also actually making them more vulnerable to the powers that be. Then I think as a second thing, we have to look at ourselves as a community, and especially a highly technical, skilled audience like this. I see a lot of unnecessary data collection still. We've been talking for 10, 15 years about don't just collect data, do it with a purpose, make sense, not data, right? But I still see a lot of sort of tech happy clapping, if you want. I do this because the machine can do it. Look what I've produced. Look at my drone flying around. Isn't that great? No, it's not actually great, because nobody can use that data for anything. So I think as a community, we have to be very self-critical. And we really have to think about what I'm doing right now. What's the use case? How does that improve the situation of the people affected by crisis? Who's going to use this data? Why is that drone out there? Is that the best way of solving that problem? And I agree with you, Sandra. I think it has gotten better. I think things have improved, but we have to be so careful, because this tech is so seductive. It's so beautiful and so fantastic what we can do. So please check yourselves and just ask, are you chasing the newest shiny thing? Or are you actually improving operations, changing the outcome of a crisis, giving more agency to crisis-affected populations? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lars Peter. That's quite a lot of food for thought. I like the way that you put it, the happy tech clapping, but also the idea to really think through that the technology should be used to empower local people, which I think is maybe a key thing that we need to take away from here. Benjamin, we also often have the impression that a lot of what we do as a digital experts is immaterial. It's not always easy to have like clear and concise figures, but can you give us an overview of what are the different very material components of the IT and IM infrastructure that we build and use, and their associated environmental impact? So in other terms, what is the relative place of tech in the much wider environmental crisis we are in?
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Hello, everyone, and I'm very happy to be here with you. Okay, yeah, you pointed actually really right. We do often consider digital as immaterial. It's obviously wrong, but we have reasons to believe so. I don't know during 30, 40 years, digital has been marketed with words and catchphrases such as dematerialization, or it's going to save trees. In the last 10 years, it's been mainly marketed with cloud, so it's really immaterial. You don't know where the material is. One way to get a sense of how these images are anchored in our society is to just have do a web search of the word digital in an image database on the internet. And it's really funny. I don't know if you've done that already, but it's really funny. You've got two kinds of pictures. You've got the one, with all the young people, in a dark room, and they are looking at a digital virtual screen, and they are just pointing out points of lights, which are dashboards or charts. It's really magical. And there's another version of it where you have no people at all. Okay, this time it's just a device or something coming out of the blue, and once again it's dots. Lightning dots representing charts or data, etc. And I think it's really interesting to just think about it and think about the messages that are contained in these images. The messages are generally that it's digital is speed, it's power, it's light, because remember all the rest of the room is dark and the points are light. And it's science, and it's science fiction. But the truth is, it is not fiction at all. It is material. The truth is, it's not fiction. So if I put it simply, our digital uses are possible only because we use a lot of material. The way to see it is just to divide these materials in 3 categories or 3 blocks, 3 tiers. The first one will be user devices. It's all the laptops, the smartphones, the desktop, the monitors, IoT objects, TVs, etc., etc. There are tons of it. Actually, there are 34. We estimate that there are 34 billions of devices running in the world. That's a lot, clearly. The second tier, second block is network. You can't do anything without network. And network, there are the physical network, like fiber, cable, all this. You've got the mobile network, and you also have the satellite networks. To do so, you need material, once again. You need the cables that can be in the land and can be submarine cables, and you hear about this quite recently. You've got antennas, you've got routers, switches, all this. And there's another component that make our digital world possible. And this component, and I saw that in the keywords you put on with the first question, or second question, sorry. There are data centers. Data centers are just big houses where you have a lot of servers, and that's where all the data are processed and all is stored. And once again, you need a lot of things in it. Let me rephrase it once again. Without these materials, you have no usage. You have no Instagram, you have no Google, you have no Netflix, you don't have any use you're doing. And guess what? It's because it's material that digital has environmental impacts. So what are these impacts? I'm long? No, it's okay.
No, you're still good. You're still good. Cool. Please go on. It's super interesting.
What are these impacts? There are many of them, actually, and that's one of the difficult aspects of it. Let me point out 3 main impacts. The first one would be, and you told it, energy and GHG, greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, that's the first thing you can think about is when we use all these devices, all these equipments, we're going to use energy. And as we use energy, as 85% of the energy in the world is from fossil fuels, we're going to have some greenhouse gas emissions. This energy, of course, we're using energy when we use our devices, but that's only one part of the equation. We also use energy when we manufacture our projects, and that can be a lot. Actually, that can be a lot. So to get figures, because you asked me about figures, and I tried to get good figures. We estimate, well, not science, but literature estimate that digital is responsible for 4% of primary energy consumption. So that's energy. And if I decline in its little cousin, which is GHG emissions, literature estimates that its digital world is responsible yearly between 2.1% and 3.9% of total GHG emissions in the world. So that's figures, and you don't really get what it means. To give you points of comparison, 4% of GHG emissions every year is nearly the same as the lorry fleet, the truck fleet in the world. So that's not nothing, that's something. And we consider that the digital world is responsible for more GHG emissions than the total civil airplane traffic in the world. So that's not nothing once again. But more interesting is the trends, because, okay, that's a figure, but you need to see the trends. And you know, there's a Paris Agreement, everyone should, you know, go down, and provision for the digital world is just, you know, increasing. And some projections put it at 7 to 8% total GHG emissions in 2025, so tomorrow. And this would be as much as the commercial buildings. So on this footprint, GHG footprint, 2/3 of this footprint in the digital world is caused by the devices. You know, you remember there are 3 tiers: devices, network, and data centers. 2/3 of the GHG emission is only on the devices. And on these 2/3, 2/3 of these 2/3 are caused by manufacturing of the devices. So we got something here. And you know what? Remember, there's 34 billions of devices. Remember, that's why. We've got here a huge challenge. I knew I would would be longer than you thought. The second impact would be what we call abiotic resources depletion. In other words, depletion of minerals, stocks, and fossil fuels. Let me do it quite shortly. Our support devices, smartphones, laptops, and etc., to be super, need lots of materials. There are more than 50, 60 metals into our smartphones today. To get a sense of how digital is towards other industries, there are only 3 industries in the world that are consuming as much metals as the digitals. The 2 other ones are defense and aeronautics. And actually, there's a newcomer, which is energy transition. You know, all these industries are really need lots of metals to be operating. And why depletion? Because actually, if every time you're going to need metal, you're going to dig into the earth, and every time you dig into the earth, the resource becomes more rare or scarce. Last impact, and I promise I'll stop after that. And you put it, someone pointed out also, I like it, it's e-waste. Our digital world is producing a lot of waste. E-waste is, there's a figure in the world which is 53.6 millions of tons of e-waste are produced every year. Of course, all not these 53.6 millions of tons are not caused by digital. We estimate that it's around 20% of these 50.3 millions of tons that are caused by digital. But the thing is, in digital, it's really hard to recycle. Major parts cannot be recycled and will end up in incineration landfills. And when I say major parts, it's more than 90%. So, put it simply, our digital equipments are not recycled. And they're not using recycled metals neither. So, to summarize, digital has multiple impacts. It's a contributor or a major contributor to these impacts, and the trends are not going the good way.
Thanks, Benjamin. I mean, whilst I think, at least I myself have heard some of the things before, like the whole magnitude that you're putting out there is rather breathtaking, but in a bad way. So maybe let's have another question. So our main arguments in favor of the use of all these digital tools and data processing tools is basically operational efficiency. and better knowledge and the quality of interventions. And we really need this to have better quality in our interventions, etc. But I'm just wondering, how short-term is this in terms of a vision when we sometimes hear that in 30 years we might not actually have the material anymore to build all the tools and the technologies that we need for all of our software and all of the things that we've built. So this is a question that goes to both of you, but maybe Benjamin, you want to start out first?
Yeah. Let me start with this. First of all, let me say that the aim is good. You said it, all of you said it. You're collecting data for something good. So the aim is good and you should not forget about this. Then the thing which is going wrong is maybe the way you do. We are doing it, you are doing it, well, everyone is doing it. Basically, I told you there's a huge challenge on devices, and we change devices too often, too soon. And when we do a data management project, for example, and that requires high specifications, you're gonna provoke obsolescence, and you're gonna make devices change. Then other thing which is wrong in the project is generally IT resources are allocated for no good reasons. You know, you'd rather go with like 3 servers in the back because you say, oh, in case we have something, but nothing never happens. Another reason why it's sometimes doing in the wrong way is that tech is deployed while it could have been made it simpler otherwise. You know, that's what you were saying, like we're obsessed with technology, and so we're going into the next new thing without thinking that we could have done it in another way, simpler. So yes, if we keep on doing this errors that are really common, like you're doing it, I'm doing it, everyone's doing it. But if we keep on doing these errors at the current pace, yes, sure, we're gonna face some shortages of metals, so shortages of energy also. And remember, there's no recycling, there's no use of recycling materials, and we need a lot of material. So yes. There's a challenge here, and remember also that you're not digital is not the only industry that going to need some metals. You know, there's going to be competition between the industries. So yeah, we've got to do something. Let me quote someone who is called Olivier Vidal, and he's saying that we'll extract the same amount of copper in the next 30 years. That's all that we've been extracting since the antiquity. So yes, we are going faster in consuming metals, and so the question is, knowing that, what to do now to avoid shortages? We're not going to, you know, keep on watching this. So much more can be done, and if we don't want this situation to happen, eco-designing projects and services should be faster and should be amplified in order to increase lifespan of devices. Collecting e-waste should be better, and give a second life to all devices should be mandatory, and repairing should be also something we should do. But definitely, so you understand, we're going to face these shortages if we don't change the way we're doing things. There are solutions, and the solutions are not only because will be possible only with three components, like citizens, governments, and organizations. So all of three have to move collectively to make things change in order to stop, you know, the errors we're doing, repeating. And you were talking about pen and paper just before. Just it's not absurd to think about pen and paper. Look, I've got a pen and paper here. But let me tell you about 2 examples I'm thinking about, and which are really interesting. Recently in France, we had cyber attacks on the hospitals. You know, everything was blocked. So what happens is that patients are going to other hospitals, and the ones who are staying in the hospital, physicians are with paper notes. No. So always keep a paper and a pen and paper next to you. It can be really useful. And the second example is a more personal one. I was doing this workshop, the Fresque du Numérique Digital College, a month ago, it was in a building and there was a shortage of energy in the area, so no energy at all. So I saw all the people in the building just leaving and going home because they have no work. You know, all the computers were just down, and you're going to see the workshop is just with cards, paper cards, and we were still working. So keep in mind that it can be really useful to keep a little bit of pen and paper.
Thank you, Benjamin. So Lars, how do you see it?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on this, so but a couple of things came to mind when you posed this question, right? And I think it's really, I really think it's excellent we're having this discussion, right? Greening of the sector, and what you brought up, Benjamin, the sort of graceful degradation. How can we make sure we continue to operate when we're in when the environment is degrading, right? At the same time, let's get scale into this. The humanitarian sector is the size of the bubblegum industry, right? The world uses as much money chewing gum as it does helping people affected by crisis. In other words, we are a fairly small industry. Now, if we begin to face a situation where we can't produce our wonderful gadgets, I'm sure other bigger industries will be faced by that equally, and that they will come up with the solution. So I'm not saying that may not happen. I think it is likely to happen. I also think the solution to that problem will come from outside. So I think, again, back to what are we actually doing? Who are going to be the first people deprived of tech if it becomes scarce? Exactly the people we try to serve. And if you look at how digitized our world is today, if suddenly you are displaced and you can't access the internet, you don't have a smartphone, maybe you have an old phone, that's probably an important event for you, right? And so are we again focusing on our own ability to operate? And oh my God, what if we can't find a computer to run our new database? Or are we looking at the people that we're trying to help affected by crisis, and what is the impact in their lives if they can't access tech?
Thank you, Lars Peter. I have one last question for you both. It's a short question, and that's basically, what do you think IAM in our sector will look like in 30 years? So, Lars, maybe you want to actually go first.
I don't know. I think that's an extremely difficult question to answer. But I think the dream scenario, of course, would be that we are in a world where the user experience of being affected by crisis is much better. That actually all of us humanitarians, that our job is to bring services to the people affected by crisis, and then they can choose what they want. Then we give them better choices. Right? Again, as you can hear, I basically have one message. Let's not forget about the people that this is really about. Let's not get self-absorbed into our little echo chamber. Let's not be servants to the donors. Let's focus on what really matters, namely the people affected by crisis. And so how do we do that? I think, what's the use case? Whenever you do something, Amazon has an empty chair in their boardroom representing the consumer. Do we really make the consumer king, the customer king in our industry? How do you do that? How do you do that in your daily life? I think that's the challenge. How do we push towards this retail experience? Some of the people affected by crisis are displaced for 10, 15 years. It's not a 3-week thing. How do we assist them over that span, that time span, to have better choices, to have a better life? And 3 sort of wishes from my side when we go about our business of developing our business model. One thing is robustness. I think we just spoke about that. We have to be really careful that we don't become dependent on tech that may be deprived either because of scarcity of natural resources or because the government shuts off the internet. Right? So can we actually do graceful degradation, I think is one thing. Secondly, can we please stop developing proprietary systems for the humanitarian sector and try to use some of the wonderful platforms that are being generated by companies far bigger than us that that update them far better than we do, that have far better security. I think we still are too, it's too local. Like we really, I still see initiatives like, yeah, I've seen that on the market. Why are you spending scarce resources developing this? And then just the last point from my side, who are you creating value for? In your daily work, who are you creating value for? Thank you.
Thanks, Lars Peter. And I have to say you're not off the hook yet, because I have one more question after all. Benjamin, what do you think? How it could look like in 30 years?
Okay, this time I'm not the expert, clearly, of your sector. So I took my little magical ball yesterday and tried to figure it out. So the way I see it, or I dream maybe it, is that you are all using refurbished devices. It's the new normality. Stop buying new devices. Thank you. You're going to use refurbished hardwares for data collection and for data use. Even drones, like you're not building drones anymore, using refurbished drones, for example. The devices you're using in 30 years are not very different from what they are right now. I mean, they're super powered. You can do a lot of things with the devices right now. Of course, in 30 years, you can say, oh, yeah, I can do many, many things more. But no, you don't need it. So keep on, you've got material which is quite the same as they are today. The way I see it is also commons are more developed. You have common data, which are shared within between organizations. You don't need to have to gather data that are existing. Now it's mandatory to have common database, and you sharing it really effectively. The way I see it maybe is also donors or central agency don't push you to use the super high tech as they are closely monitored by civil society, and they have maybe a financial they have to pay taxes if they ask you to use super high-tech things that are doing environmental harm. And maybe one last thing is that you're not going to like it, but all your projects must have an environmental assessment before going and while going on. So it's more work to do for you, but it's compulsory.
Thanks. Thank you. I do, after all, have a question, and that's basically, what can we give to the audience in terms of what key questions should we ourselves asking when we are starting a new IAM or data-driven project to understand the environmental impact it could have? Whilst
okay,
Benjamin already said that there could still be things done with pen and paper. Of course, there are some aspects where we will not go back to it. But maybe you have suggestions for these data practitioners here in the room on designing of a more virtuous or more sober or more sustainable IAM systems. And also we talk about responsible data practices, but how can this materialize from an environmental perspective? So this is a question also for both of you. Benjamin, if you want to.
Yeah. Okay, I would say there are 3 principles, and there are then actions to do. 3 principles are avoid obsolescence in all your projects, then use only what is necessary, don't do more than you need. And the 3rd principle would be assess the need for going digital. If you don't need to go digital, don't go, okay? That are the 3 principles you have to keep in mind. Then I would say that there are 3 sets of questions you should ask to yourselves. The first ones are really common to any data management projects, like good principles. Is there a need analysis? Is there a use case? You pointed out really clearly also earlier. Is my data and my metadata specified and documented so you can use it through the times? Of course, if you're doing, it's always that's one thing which is really interesting if you're looking at the environmental side is the whole life cycle of your project. you know, you're doing a project for one time, but it's going to keep on living, and so you have to be able to keep on maintaining all this data. So if you don't document it, of course, nobody's going to be able to maintain it afterwards. So yeah, document it and respect common standards and define a policy for archiving and deleting your data. But that's something I'm pretty sure you're doing. I hope you're doing, and that's really common in data management. Then you've got a whole set of questions about environment. Again, do I need these data projects? Because the more data you have, the more resources you're gonna use, and resources are SSD or HDD, so hard drives is plus other materials. So and that has an impact, believe me. Then question would be like, to avoid, you know, very large amounts of data, for example, real-time data or pictures, and especially satellite pictures are taking a lot of space. So maybe think, if you can do another way, just do another way, or if you need it, just think about a good policy for archiving or deleting, because it's going to take too much space and you're going to mobilize too much resource. What can I tell you? Is the data already collected? And can I reuse it? How can I make my data collection sober? Can I use low-tech devices instead of drones, IA, or whatever? Is my service eco-design? You know, when I'm going to use my data, is it eco-design or not? Is it usable on all devices with poor network conditions in order to avoid obsolescence once again? And then there are a couple of questions about where do you host your data? Is it in a good data center? Is the energy really proper? Is it good energy or not? And also there's and you see me coming. There's also a whole set of questions, and I'm not going to keep on talking because I talk too much. But a whole set of questions about ethics and who's hosting your data is really important, because guess what? There's Cloud Act, if I remember well, which is the ability of the US government to just have a look at your data, whatever, if it is hosted in the US or if the data center is using US components. So it's you have to keep an eye on this. Okay.
Thank you, Benjamin. And Lars, what do you think can be done?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things that will make your life more difficult. Firstly, focus on building systems that really enables a tailored experience for the individual affected by crisis, but without exposing them to danger because you collect data at the individual level. Secondly, push back on your colleagues who may be less tech proficient than you are when they come and want something they don't need. Tell them you don't need that. Right? Don't build these systems that just collect the data that nobody ever looks at. And thirdly, let's move from just collecting and storing data to actually building some really powerful visualizations that hold our own decision makers accountable. So make your bosses' lives more difficult by using tech to show the consequences of their choices by highlighting what they actually choose to do and not to do, so that we have greater accountability and we serve the people we work for better. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, both of you. We have now time for questions, actually. We have 2 people in the room that are meant to be carrying the mics. So it should be Clara and Anastasia. Can we see you? They're up here. Okay, great. Thank you. So everyone in the room, please just raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Then either, well, someone will come to you to actually get the mic to you so that you can ask your question. You can also say if you want both of our keynote speakers to answer, or if it's a question goes specifically to one of them. And also online, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. And we will also be getting those questions to our speakers as well.
So hi, and thanks for those insights. I mean, I was really interested. I just have a question about the recommendations, about the choices on high-tech, low-tech, or no-tech, or whatever. Are there tools right now to assess the environmental impact of one choice over another? And if there's no tools right now, is it realistic to think of such tools in the future, or is it too complex to have a simple assessment for these kind of things?
That's a really good question. Okay, I don't think there's immediate tool ready on the market to do so right now. But is it complicated, and should it be done? Yes, it should be done. And is it complicated? Well, it really depends on the the level of granularity you want to go. I think to do the assessment, the first assessment, you don't need to be micro. You need to be micro. You need to be macro. So in order to do so, you can do it quite. I don't see it as difficult. And no, it's okay. No, yeah, you can do it. I think it's not difficult to do it macro, and so you should start maybe right now by doing it. Train yourself, and I guess in a few years it's going to be really common and really easy to do.
We have another question. We actually have almost 50 minutes, actually a bit more than 50 minutes to 15 to ask questions. So we can have a real conversation going. There's someone showing the hands.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. So I wanted to make a comment on what was just been shared. I was wondering, like, instead of a new or brand new tool, would that be made a part of the need assessment for any localized solution when there is, kind of, and it's done at that stage of the project rather than, kind of providing a solution when it is not needed from the onset?
I assume your question is around needs assessment on yeah, so that's sort of what I work with. That's what ACAPS does, and I think it's been very high on the agenda for the past 10, 15 years. So where have we gotten to? I think we have managed to correct some of the worst mistakes that we make inside our little industry. I think we now know more or less what the robust approach to this is. We're not fully implementing it yet. When I look where I think our big failure is that I don't think we have managed to truly give voice to the people affected by crisis. I think it's still way too much experts flying out and saying, oh, this is the problem. And so we have to continue to explore how do we do that. It's very difficult. How do you make thousands of noises more than noise? How do you feed that into an institutional decision-making process? It's very difficult. Right? Our strategy in ACAPS is enhance the agency of crisis-affected populations through better use of data and analysis. And we actually discussed a lot whether that was right to set that ambition or whether that was arrogant in a sense. I mean, that's not what we are doing. Right? I think we're acutely aware of that. But I think that's what we should be doing. So it's a stretch goal. And I think we need to continue to challenge each other on how do we democratize the shaping of the humanitarian narrative, basically. And it's a big ask. It's very difficult. It can be done, I have no doubt.
Do you want to add?
Actually, I'm sorry, I'm kind of slow sometimes in my head, so I'm going to add something to the previous question. I'm really sorry about that. Just one thing really important that I didn't say and which is really important is awareness on this topic. Obviously, right now I'm telling you things about it. If you're going to your organizations and say, okay, we're going to go to a project and we're going to do it low tech, they're going to look at you like, what are you doing and why is it necessary? So you've got to raise awareness in your organizations about these topics. And to continue the question, the assessment would be really easy if all the organization is sensibilized and is aware of what's happening, and it's going to be really clear. You're not going to use a lot of time to assess with data your impact, your environmental impact, because everyone will be quite clear about the fact that yes, you don't need the drone to do that. You can only, have people on the field, maybe, I don't know, whatever. But it's going to be much more easier if the whole organization is aware of this topic.
Thanks, Benjamin.
There's a question right here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for the discussion. Very interesting. Maybe question/comment regarding what you said regarding using proprietary software. And obviously, I think a lot of us here use open source software all the time. I just wanted to say that software is hard to develop. And when you see what Google does, obviously you're like, wow, these are awesome products. Apple, Microsoft, all these guys. But they also invest lots of money. And our community, unfortunately, doesn't have that kind of resources to build such amazing products. Sometimes they do, but it's hard. So I think maybe a reflection on we need to use open source product, I think, from an ethical perspective, but at the same time we're faced with the products where we don't have as many resources, and it's hard sometimes to get the same level of efficiency of return investment, if I can say. And that's, I think, it's a tricky thing, tricky spot we're in. So, and that also ties maybe to the environmental issue where where should we host these software, etc. So I don't know. I think there's a nuance in this statement, and we should be aware of that as well.
Do you want to react?
I can go after that.
I thought we agreed, right? What you said, I agree with that. Right. So if I didn't say that, I must have been less precise than you are. Right.
I would add something this time on time. That in the community of people who are taking, who are studying the impact of a digital environment, we do like open sources softwares. Why? Because open source softwares are avoiding obsolescence of the devices. One of the main causes why you put your smartphone, laptop, whatever devices in the bin is because the software are not supported anymore. How many times did you have your, on your phone, these messages like this app is not compatible with iOS X whatever or Android whatever. The fact that proprietarian, sorry, I don't know the English word, but private softwares are updated regularly and means that they are demanding more and more resources, and so they are generating obsolescence. So that's why in open source we don't have this happening. If you look at Linux, for example, or Unix, you can have desktops which are 10, 12 years old, and they are still running on this OS, open source OS, because they are demanding less resources than the proprietarian ones. So we do like open source. I think we found. My point is, open source is a part of the answer to a longer lifespan of devices, and so to reduce the environmental impact of the digital.
Great, thanks. Do we have some more questions? Yeah. There are some hands going up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Talking about technology rising so fast and talking about going low-tech, my name is Joshua Gore from Kibera slum in Nairobi, Kenya. We're dealing with low-income people from the slum in an area that technology and internet has not penetrated so much. And we want to accommodate everyone with the idea of not leaving no one behind. Do you think it's really possible not to leave no one behind with the high rising of technology and new ideas coming, and also looking at the fact that we still have to deal with areas that don't have internet? Thank you.
So I think the way the world works is that it does leave some people behind. And I think that tech, as you say, is making that worse. I think it's our job to lower that threshold for the most vulnerable people to be able to access tech. Right? So I think, I mean, we don't live in the most just of worlds. I think that's no secret. I think as humanitarians and development workers, this is our job. Our job is to empower the people who are being left behind. But clearly it's happening, and I think tech poses a great danger in that respect also, yeah. So I think we have to be very aware of that. Thank you.
I would say that it depends how far you want to go. I think we've gone a little bit too much in the Western world. We've been too much. We use too much of a digital world. We use our smartphones for whatever reasons and no need. So we've got to get back to using technology for what it is useful for. So I totally agree with you. If you want to deploy dumb phones or smartphones to this population for uses that are useful, for example, health, or to get food or whatever, or to be aware, or to have informations about the weather or whatever, that is important. And I would say yes, totally, 100%. But if you want to give them this technology to just to watch YouTube videos of cats, I would say no. There's no need for it. So we in the Western world, I think we have got to slow down, and we all have to meet in the middle line, which is technology for the real uses and for our wealth.
Thanks, Benjamin. Are there more questions in the room? Yeah. Someone up. Okay. First here and then up there.
Hi everyone. Sophie here from Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. I'm actually just following up on something that Josh just said there. When we're conducting, and this lady here too on needs assessment. So when we are conducting our needs assessment with our users, and I'm referring particularly to those who are affected by crisis, we know that humans have an incentive to lie, right? Especially when there's a really funky bit of tech on the table. So my question to you guys, and actually to everyone else in the room, is how do we simultaneously invest in people and not only the tech to fully enable them to recognize their needs so that they're not seduced by that funky bit of tech? And yeah, I'm just curious if anyone's got any examples of how to do this in a successful way or not. Yeah. Thank you.
So I think this is where I go. Thank you for that question. It's a really difficult one to answer. I think there are two sides to it. If again, back to ACAPS, which is, this is what we do. Our slogan is, see the crisis, change the outcome. And it's a constant struggle to balance those two things. On one side, to deliver the most precise appreciation of what has happened. And on the other hand, to really think through who are making the decisions here, who actually makes a difference here. Now, I think maybe the biggest problem we have is a concentration of power in how decisions are made. And I would maybe counter-ask, you say, how can we stop people from not telling the truth when they get a smartphone in their hand? I would say, how can we stop a big UN agency from serving its own interest rather than reacting to what is in the field? And I think the only way to do that is to have multiple perspectives on the table. I think we need to, because we are vulnerable in the sense that especially in the humanitarian sector, we're so obsessed with coordination. We don't want to duplicate anything. Don't distribute twice in the same area, all of these things. And I think that obsession makes us overlook the fact that when you're talking about sense-making, when you're talking about actually constructing a narrative, the opposite applies. You actually want redundant analytical capacities in situations of high level of ambiguity and uncertainty. You need more than one opinion on the table. And of course they game the system. so would I. Right? Of course they do. And I think we have to be very careful not to be too specialist about this. I mean, we're talking about people's lives that have been deeply affected. We are one coping strategy among many for them. Of course, they're going to do what they think gets them the most. That's sort of their job. I think our job is to make sure that their voices are heard and that no one voice can really dominate and monopolize the humanitarian narrative. And I do think quality of information is a problem when it's crowdsourced. I also think the analysis of it and really making sense out of it so that you can use it to change the crisis is really difficult. And probably we need a different business model altogether. We probably need the money to come through a different channel with a different set of incentives attached to it for that to change. Thank you.
So there is a question right here.
Can I just quickly just would say one thing. I think we have a collective effort to make low-tech sexy finally. It's not sexy right now. We'd rather go for high-tech and good things. So I think it's a change of a narration or narrative. I don't know how to say it in English, but we've got to change the whole story about this. To do so, I think everyone has to be involved. For example, taxes can be a good lever to change what. Yep.
No, keep going. I want to respond.
Your taxes, laws, and even communication. I think communication has a huge impact on our collective representation of digital and how sexy it is. We have to change all this, and I'm quite. I can be optimistic because when I look at what it was 30 years, 40 years ago, regarding, for example, plastic bags or cars in the Western world, I mean, we have shifted. Not completely, but we are shifting our point of view on these topics. So I think it's possible to change this vision.
Eventually, right? Because I'm really struck by something that Lars said, which is tech is good at concentrating power. And if we're saying those affected by crisis can get the second-hand drones, the tech that's not so sexy, aren't we just perpetuating this disparity between those who can afford the funky tech and those who can't?
Yeah, I think again back to the bubblegum industry, right? We are quite small in the big picture of things, and I think maybe what you say, that's the wrong way to look at it, right? And I think maybe what we should be thinking about, are we ourselves creating barriers, or are we lowering threshold for the crisis-affected populations to be able to engage? I think that's the question, and maybe it's about us becoming the interface to whatever is there, so that you adapt to the context and meet people where they are.
Thanks. We have a question over there, right?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Mariana Carrillo from the GIZ in Germany. I really liked what you said about creating these powerful data visualizations for accountability. And my question would be also connected to what Josh was asking. So are you aware, I mean, in order to lower this threshold and like bridge these inequality gaps that we're talking about, are you aware of any frameworks or examples, best practices that actually bridge data, like bring together data practitioners and policymakers for using data to empower people? And if you could, like share your experience on this, it would be great. Thanks.
A couple of examples would be, I think Ground Truth Solutions with their work on feedback mechanisms is a step in the right direction. I think the whole accountability to affected populations is a step in the right direction. It still has the feel of a sideshow. It's something we can add on. It's not something we have to do to actually operate. And I think that needs to change. It needs to be an integral part of our business model. So I think at that end, I think some things are happening. Speaking to donors, I also sense that there is a shift there. I've in particular seen how the Informed Severity Index, the Global Crisis Severity Index, is being used in how we distribute resources between crises. So that I think an accountability is increasing. I still think we have a massive problem with decision making in the sector, and we actually don't have a lot of studies about it. It's by and large a black box. But the two things that seem to come out from the studies that I pick up is, one, we do path dependency, so when something happens, we do what we did last time, plus minus 10%, and that the loudest voice dominate. So the political economy of the HCT probably has the biggest determination of whether this is a food crisis or a wash crisis or a health crisis or all of the above, right? And I really think we need to focus on that. And I think tech has a big role to play in that. It's as I said, it's a double-edged sword. It can both serve the powers that be, or it can be something disruptive that holds us more accountable and makes it clearer the choices we make with scarce resources, so that we can be more accountable.
You want to add on, Benjamin? Oh, no. There is actually going to be, in the roundtable this afternoon, the Ukraine crisis, Ground Truth is actually going to be there and speaking, and there's also a lightning talk in case you're interested, just to flag that. I'm just wondering, do we have any online questions by any chance? No? Okay, so we can, let me check the watch, so we can take maybe 1 or 2 more questions in the room actually, depending how long they are. Yes?
Hello, I'm Tasauf. I'm from Bangladesh actually. The question is more like a supplementary question to all the questions that came out. It's with my experience in the field level in Bangladesh and in the Cox's Bazar, where the Rohingya refugee crisis is happening, ACAPS is also working over there with information management. So there has been a frequent argument in the field level that whether the using of the aid money, where should it go? It should be more to the IM and tech integration or implementation, or towards the core humanitarian responses and the support system to the vulnerable population. Wherever these conversations are happening, in the sectoral level, it's not happening. It is more in the agency level. These sort of conversations are going on, and always we have to go through these arguments. So what are thoughts from your sides on this? Thank you.
It's a really excellent question. And I think the answer is depends on the return on investment. Right? Clearly, in some operations, we have under-leveraged the enabling services such as assessment and others, and therefore have given inappropriate assistance. And sometimes I worry that there are so many H2H organizations that they are actually becoming quite a burden on the system. And I think we always talk about an ecosystem. And I think we have to get serious about that, because an ecosystem is a fairly brutal place. And there are a lot of people, a lot of organizations that would have to sort of be put out of business for that to really be a healthy ecosystem. And so I think we need to continue asking ourselves that question. I don't think there is one clear answer to it. We worked in Bangladesh, as you mentioned, and we had an extremely interesting experience where we had a big joint assessment with the government, with civil society, and it became so good that in a couple of days, you could actually, by phoning all the upsillas, you could get a really detailed picture of what was going on after a storm, for example. And we did that, and then suddenly somebody said, oh my God, we've just killed the assessment ecosystem, because everybody used to go out and do their own assessments. Now there was only one. What if that's wrong? What if that one assessment is wrong? What if that one assessment is being used by the government to implement an agenda? How vulnerable are we there? And so it's a great question you ask, and there's no one answer to it. We constantly have to think about return on investment, and these services are cheap compared to actually operating. Right? So what's the return on investment, and what's the health of the ecosystem? Do we have the right actors? Do we have enough opinions on the table to be fairly sure that it's robust? I think those are the things to consider in sort of answering the question. Thank you.
I think we can take one more question. I think there was one more raised hand. Oh, there are even more now. But I think down here was faster than the other one. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I would actually want to go back to the discussion we had about open source and proprietary data. In my example, I work in the Republic of Moldova. We oftentimes have the problem that the government actually wants the proprietary solutions. Can you give us a primer or some experience how we convince them otherwise? And one more addition to specifically the software part of it. Oftentimes software is designed for a very specific purpose. How do we make it multi-purpose? I can give an example. A software designed based on a specific legislation of regulation. It changes, software becomes obsolete because the processes are different. Can you give also some examples around this space? Thank you.
Okay, so I may have messed up here, right? I'm not a tech guy, I'm not an IT guy. What I meant by proprietary is humanitarians should not develop their own specific solutions if they can find it somewhere else, be that open source or just don't do it yourself, was basically what I was trying to say, because I don't think there's a return on investment. But I think maybe your comment was actually slightly different. So that's what I meant. Right? I don't know much about software development, but I sometimes see us wasting a lot of scarce resources on doing stuff that is precisely wrong.
I don't know if I'm going to add something interesting, but I try. What I can say is that maybe what you said is really interesting. If laws are changing, which means processes are changing, if you've got a proprietarian software, it can be really, can stop right now, because if it is developed in another country with another legislation, you're not going to be able to use it. That's why open source softwares are easier to maintain and to make it more specific to your own country. So that's why I feel that it's a bit. It's surprising to me if a government wants, proprietarian softwares, because it's not maintainable as much as an open source one. Plus, there is, if it is an American software, you have something which is called the cloud out that I was talking earlier, and so your data can be, looked by the U.S. government. That's what happened. By the way, that's what happened in France. In France, they wanted to move the health data hub. All the health data, they wanted to move into a cloud with Microsoft softwares. So that was a key thing, and so they stopped it, because that means that Microsoft can look at all the health data of French people. So we don't want that.
Great, thanks. There was this one lady in the back. Do you have a really short question? Because then I'm tempted to still take it. Yes, that was you, wasn't it?
But my question is more, how do folks in the humanitarian sector balance all of these challenges? So if we say, okay, we should work with, existing things that can scale, that probably means corporate. But we know corporate is not protecting the environment. We know corporate is not protecting privacy. So what are some of the ways that the humanitarian sector should operate and move in ways that are accessible, but also protecting the environment, but also protecting privacy, and also being able to scale?
That doesn't sound like a short question, so 1 minute. I don't know who of you would like to take it, but 1 minute, please.
So don't be cutting edge, don't be first adopters. We work in really difficult environment. If we try to be cutting edge in terms of the kind of tech we use, I think we'll fail. We'll make ourselves very vulnerable. So be borderline Luddites.
Thanks. Great, thank you, Lars Peter, for that very short answer.
I'll give you a better answer.
Yeah, there's coffee breaks after, in case you want to chat. So thank you, first of all, very much for both of you, Lars Peter and Benjamin, for actually being part and really having this inspiring debate. I think you brought very interesting thoughts. I'll still have things in my head. The bubblegum industry, I think that was the stick in my head for a little while longer. And also, of course, all these mind-blowing, staggering figures that you've brought on the billion devices and what it all means. I think there are quite many foods for thoughts and things to take away from what you've both
brought today. And I think this was an excellent opening for our 3 days conference to, you know, set the pace, set the debate. And you'll find many sessions that are on this topic as well. So in terms of maybe upcoming next, first of all, also thank you, also thank to the audience, to all your excellent questions, to participating to our online survey, and also to the participants online. Thank you very much. So I think we have to move here, else we are kind of right in the middle. So upcoming next is the coffee break. That's 20 minutes. It's upstairs. And we are back on site at 11 o'clock for a series of very interesting workshops ranging from green data, QGIS, graphic modular, very technical topic, how to self-organize teams, experience and case studies from the HIRAMS initiative, as well as the culture map, which is about different ways of working, and last but not least, software development best practices. So that's quite a wide range. You've maybe seen at the entrance, there are a few slots still available. So if some of you haven't decided on a workshop for this upcoming session, you can take a look there and see what might be still available, and you can sign up for it. And for our online audience, we have upcoming next the chance to learn more about remote monitoring and best tools and practices as well, also after the break. So many thanks again, and yes, see you soon at the coffee break and around. Thank you very much, everyone.